Today on Listen Up, when it comes to faith, we're fickle. North Americans are shifting allegiances, switching loyalties, and shopping for spirituality. Changing churches, next. Welcome to Listen Up. I'm Lorna Dueck. Church. The vast majority of us say we belong to one, but for increasing numbers, the reality is our hearts may be there, but our bodies are not. Today, we're turning our lens onto the church in North America. How is it changing? Where is it growing? What is it doing right? And where has it gone wrong? According to the latest surveys, only about 20% of Canadians attend any kind of weekly religious service today. That represents a huge decline from the 70% who attended weekly services in the 1950s. But that doesn't mean we've rejected faith altogether. Close to 7 in 10 of us attend a religious service at least once a year, causing experts to describe Canada as a nation of believers but not belongers. A small minority say religion is very important in our lives. Not so in the United States, where a majority of people there say religion is still very important in their lives. And yet churches in the U.S. are also undergoing seismic shifts as everything from immigration patterns to the consumer mentality among churchgoers leave their mark. When the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life set out to map the religious landscape of the United States, they interviewed more than 35,000 adults. I met with their director, Dr. Luis Lugo, in Washington to learn about their findings. There are some findings in the Religious Landscape Survey which are very surprising, and that is how fluid your religious affiliation is in this country. Explain what surprised you about the Religious Landscape Survey in America.
Well, there were several things that we found very interesting and surprising there. You mentioned one of them, and that is the extent to which Americans are on the move religiously, the extent to which they change religious affiliation. We all knew it was happening. You can observe it. We know members of our families who have changed. But this is the first time on a major scale in which this has been documented for the country. And indeed, it has garnered quite a bit of attention because of that.
So 44% have a change factor in their religious experience.
Right.
Switching affiliations, switching loyalties. What are the reasons why they're making these kind of changes?
There is a certain consumer model that people have applied to religion in this country, just like with everything else. And so people find it very much to their liking to shop around for those faith communities or those ideas that are most answering to their needs at that particular moment. We know, for instance, that a large percentage of Americans lived in religiously mixed marriages, but it's not clear to us from looking at the results of the first survey that it was marrying someone of another faith that prompted people to switch. In fact, those results would argue the opposite. So Americans are not only used to dealing with religious diversity out there, they're used to dealing with it in their own homes.
Unlike most other Western countries, Americans have retained a relatively high level of religious commitment. 6 out of every 10 say that religion is very important in their lives. But there's been a shift here too. 16% say they have no religious affiliation at all. That's an increase, says Dr. Lugo, one that must be kept in perspective.
Over time, the United States has moved incrementally, in a more secular direction. Although, again, I caution that a good percentage of that 16% that's unaffiliated still has a fairly vibrant religious pulse. We've been in a major wave of immigration since the mid-1960s when we changed our immigration laws. And this is having a huge impact across the board. It is generating more religious diversity outside of our more traditional Judeo-Christian religions. A lot more Muslims, a lot more Hindus, Buddhists, and so forth. These are highly represented among immigrant populations.
It's not just the religious landscapes of the United States that's been affected by immigration. North of the border, the new book, Christianity and Ethnicity in Canada, explores the complex relationship between religious and ethnic identity. But what does it all mean at a practical level? Deeply held beliefs impact our social values as well. Well, to help us understand the shifting values of Canadians, we're joined by Michael Adams, the founding president of Environics Research, Canada's leading polling firm specializing in Canadian social values. Michael, thank you very much for being with Listen Up.
Great to be here, Lorna.
We have fled Canadian churches.
Yes.
Attendance dropped dramatically. In my lifetime, from 70% to less than 17% of weekly attendance.
Right.
Why?
Yeah, big story. Some people would say, well, part of the reason is that we replaced the church with the state. And so that many of the things that the church used to do for us, taking care of other people and so on, we brought in social welfare state. So we didn't need the church for that anymore. But also I think after the Second World War, you have increasing affluence, you have an incredible emphasis on education and people being taught, think for yourself. And a questioning in the culture, we found ourselves in the culture questioning that traditional authority.
And yet still Canadians would say 75% of us are at least theists. We believe in God.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is we did this study, Environics, for the United Church, because they were interested in people in their middle age. And they knew that, because I had found it in my books, that there's this spiritual quest. There's a quest for meaning. And because when you get rid of religion and traditional religion, what are you going to replace it with? Well, you're going to replace it with materialism, hedonism, fun, and what people find is that that's not enough in their lives. There's something else that's going to give them meaning. Now, family gives you meaning and so on, but then there's also this quest for community that you also want to have as well. So what we found is that people said, yeah, I want a church, and I want to be able to discuss religion with other people, or at least, actually, not religion so much as the eternal questions, like why am I here? Where did we all come from? Where are we headed as a species? Are we a good species or are we bad? What about other religions? What do they have to say?
And what guides did they reach for in
well,
that? If they're not going to church, if they're not going for teaching?
So they're kind of drifting, right? And remember that in their youth, they rejected religion. So there's kind of a bias against religion. What the church needs to do is not provide definitive answers, but a context in which people can have respectful conversations with each other, so they can draw out then that connection of respect for each other and trying in some way to help us at least figure out what the questions are and some hypotheses about what the answers are, so we humans can live together without killing each other as we've done in so much of our history.
All right, the changing scene of Canadian belief and activity. Michael Adams, president of Environics, thank you very much.
Great to be here, Lorna.
When Listen Up returns, we'll hear from a culture expert who says the church sold its soul to our ego-centered culture, and declining attendance is simply the price it has to pay.